In the last video, I finished up the neck blank. Since then, I've drilled out the hole for the truss rod. While it's a very important hole, it's not particularly interesting to see being done. And I've also marked the fretboard for the fretboard markers. And what I did was I took my digital calipers, figured out exactly how wide the nut was, made a center mark, and did the same thing here at the heel end. Obviously, since I've done a lot of work to make the neck blank, there's no more center line here. We chopped this piece off with the bandsaw, and so what I've done is made a new center line on the fretboard. The important thing to realize here when you're doing sort of the standard dot, 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 2 dots at the 12th fret, dot, 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 is you need to make a straight line, because if you try and do the center of each fret, when you look down the neck, it'll actually be a little wiggly. I made that mistake on my first neck, and only I'm going to notice it, but you still notice it. And so what I've done, as I said, is I put a center line down the middle, and then at each fret, I've drawn a diagonal line. And what this does is, at the intersection point of the diagonal line and the center line is the center of the fret. And so by drilling in my holes into that intersection, I should be able to get a nice looking set of fret markers. And so what I'm going to do next is just use, and I believe these are called owls, the pokey poker. I'm going to start to put a dot at each intersection. And what this is going to do is going to help my Forstner bit to be exactly in the right spot, so that when I drill out my holes, they're really precise. Because this is a really precise piece of fabrication here, because the inlays that I'm going to use are something like 5 or 6 millimeter circle dots that are only something like 1/8 or 1/4 inch deep. And so we need to make sure that they're both lined up perfectly on the fretboard and I don't go too far. And so using an owl to mark those dots is the first step for accuracy. And so I'm going to do that right now, and then we're going to move over to the drill press and start doing some test holes. So you can see here, I've got the holes exactly on that intersection. It's amazing, I think I got that set of tools for four different all pointy things, a set of 4 for $2, but it makes such a huge difference in ensuring that your hole starts off at the exact intersection of the lines. So now I'll move over to the drill press and start doing some test holes. So I have my inlay dots right here, and I have my caliper, and so I can go ahead and measure and just make sure before I do anything. So you can see here, we're just north of a 1/4 inch diameter, and so I'll certainly use a 1/4 inch bit. I'm sure what I'll end up using is just a light bit of sandpaper if necessary to make things fit. I certainly don't want to wiggle the drill bit or do anything to try and make the hole just slightly bigger than a 1/4 inch, because precision really does matter here. And in terms of how thick the inlay piece is, okay, we've got 5/100ths of an inch. And so we got to be really precise here. It's barely gonna, the drill bit's barely gonna touch the fretboard before we need to stop. And so we'll go with that. This is probably one of the more precise holes I've ever drilled, but we'll make it work. One thing that's great about using this digital caliper, and this is just a cheapish one from a local hardware store, is that it has a mode which actually works out really well as a unit calculator for you. And so when I measured that dot, it turns out it's 3/64 of an inch, which is pretty weird. Obviously, the United States is one of the only places that uses sort of fractional inches. But when I hit the mode button, it shows that that's 1/1100ths of a millimeter. And my drill press has a stop on it, and the stop has millimeters. And so this is perfect. What I can do is set the drill stop to 1 millimeter. That will hopefully keep me from going too far. If the abalone dot is just slightly proud of the fretboard, that's actually what we want. We can either use a scraper or sandpaper to smooth that down. And so I'm going to set my drill press to 1 millimeter. I'm still going to do test holes in a piece of practice wood because, again, 1 millimeter deep hole is really precise. And so I want to make sure that I have everything set up the way I need it before I start drilling into my neck blank. So you can see I just have a piece of scrap wood. My wife does crafts, and so she uses a lot of plywood. And so, we keep scraps like this around for doing just this, type of tool setup and things like that. And it might be hard to appreciate how hard it is to drill a 1 millimeter hole. Of course, I have a Harbor Freight drill press here. I'm a enthusiast of using the kind of cheapest tool you can afford. And it does a fantastic job. But one thing it's not is tremendously accurate with the depth stop. Usually this isn't an issue, but as you can see, I've drilled a lot of different holes. In this case, try and get this lined up, I'm pretty close to what I need. Here, the fret marker is just slightly taller than the fretboard. And so I think this is probably okay. The variance in the depth of the hole actually comes with the Forstner bit has a little tip, which is going to be great because it's going to fit into the hole that I poked in with an awl before. But the variance in the height of the hole is actually influenced by how much you actually let the tip go into the wood beforehand. And so, yeah, all I can do here is try and be really careful. Obviously you can never, if you don't drill it down, you can just keep trying. If you go too far, then you need to fill it. And so I'm going to try not to go too far, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, 1 down, 9 to go. So I got my 10 holes drilled. It looked to be just about perfect. So now what I can do is just take all my abalone dots and go through. Now, these are actually, obviously manufactured, so they're going to be slightly different in each place. And then, of course, how I set the drill press up for each of these holes is going to be slightly different. And so what I'm going to do is actually take each of these dots and try and find the best fitting hole for it. This is going to help me minimize having to do any scraping or sanding. And what I'm going to use to To glue them in place is black CA glue. This stuff is fantastic for doing lots of different things. In this case, I'm using black because it's a dark fretboard. They do sell brown. I don't have any of the brown glue. They have clear, but in this case, the dots should fit so tightly that any squeeze out that's above would just be a very, very faint black line. Hopefully, it will just look like part of the grain of the Cerakote wood. And so, yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. A lot of patience, and then the super fast supersetting glue. So as was bound to happen, I got a little happy with holes at the 7th and 9th fret, and they're just slightly too deep. And so just to show, how small of, how tight tolerances that we're talking about here, this one, so I can show it, get in the camera here, is just fractionally below the fretboard. But, ultimately you can feel it right here. Same thing with this 9th fret, and this one is a little worse. You can definitely see the lip there. And so what I'm going to do is actually take some of the dust from drilling out the fretboard and put it back in the holes. We only need to move this up a fraction of a millimeter, and the combination of the glue, the dust, and then the abalone fret marker being pushed down, it will solidify and it'll be no problem at all. The other holes, actually surprisingly, the 15th, 17th, and 19th are actually way more proud than I would have liked. Of course, this isn't going to be a problem because I'll sand that over, and you'll never know the difference. But we do have some tiny repairs here, and I'm going to do that. And that's it. I'm going to let this dry for a little while. Usually with CA glue, you'd spray accelerator to clean it up. But the thing here is that my holes are drilled at an exact 1/4 inch, and these abalone pieces are machined at a 1/4 of an inch. And so almost all the glue is actually going to be underneath and hopefully not accessible by the accelerator. So I'll just leave this sit for hours. I have to go to work, and when this dries, I can go back and lightly smooth out all of these dots so that they're flush with the fretboard. So the abalone dots have had all day to dry. CA glue only takes 15 minutes or something to set, and so hours and hours later it's fine. All the inlays feel nice and solid. So what I'm going to do now is use my fine triangle file here to actually get these as close to flush with the fretboard as possible. Now, when you read on the internet, abalone dust is somewhere between not so bad to equivalent to breathing in asbestos fibers. So I'm going to take the precaution of actually wearing this mask. I'm going to wipe off the dust here, and then from there we'll just sort of, like I said, try and level these out. I'm still going to sand the fretboard later anyway, so I'm not particularly worried about getting them perfect. But that said, I am going to put tape around some of the edges here just to make sure I don't dig into the fretboard and cause some really deep scratches I'll have to deal with later. Took about 15 minutes for me to file these down. One of the unexpected benefits is it actually seems to make the abalone sparkle a little more. I don't know if there was a coating on it or they were just rough sanded or what, but if I bring it over here to the camera, I don't know if I can catch the light the right way. Obviously I have to clean the dust off the fretboard as well, but these abalone inlays are really shining in the light. So what I'll end up doing is sanding the fretboard some more. I'll definitely go to at least like 400 before I put the frets on. I still need to do the side dots as well. And then once I have all that taken care of, I can go ahead and carve the neck.